You've probably told yourself, this is it, I have to change, and then you didn't. Not because you're weak, but because wanting change and actually changing are two entirely different things. And if we're honest, most of us don't fail at life because we're incapable. We fail because we're exhausted, mentally, emotionally, existentially. And laziness? Sometimes, but mostly overwhelmed, stuck somewhere between everything we should be doing and the hopeless dread that tells us it won't matter anyway. But it can. Before we go anywhere, let's pause and take a detour back in time to a life that looked far more defeated than yours probably does. In 1954, a man named James was walking through the gates of Wandsworth Prison in London. He had just completed his third sentence for theft. Before that, he'd been in and out of reform schools, juvenile detention, and multiple psychiatric institutions. James had been labelled everything from unfixable to untrustworthy. But most damning of all, he believed them. He was 28 years old and had never held a job longer than a month. He had no qualifications, no savings, no stable friends. Just a crumpled piece of paper in his pocket with the name of a small halfway house scribbled on it in pencil. When James arrived, he was shown to a cramped room with peeling paint and a single chair. There were no grand lectures about turning his life around, no motivational speeches, just silence. And oddly, a bookshelf. One night, out of sheer boredom and insomnia, he picked a book at random. It was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. He had no idea who that was. Some Roman dude, he assumed. But he opened the book and read, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And something cracked open. That was the night he started writing. Not because he was inspired, not because he had a plan, but because it was the only thing that helped him feel like something inside of him still existed. Something untouched by the arrests, the labels, the wasted years. Years later, James would become James Allen Whitaker. He would go on to lecture in universities, counsel inmates, and receive an honorary doctorate in philosophy. The man who had spent nearly half his early life behind bars ended up teaching the very stoic philosophy that saved him in a halfway house basement. You may not be in prison, but you may be trapped in a life that doesn't feel like yours. And when you're lazy and overwhelmed, the last thing you need is a list of top 10 life hacks or a morning routine from a billionaire monk who wakes up at 4 a.m. to drink clay water and meditate in a cryo chamber. What you need, maybe all you need, is to realize that your life will change the second you stop asking for permission to feel ready. Because readiness is a lie. It's a fantasy sold to us by people who forgot what it was like to be drowning. Here's a hard truth. Change doesn't begin when you feel motivated. It begins when you stop waiting to. You don't need to want to exercise to put your shoes on. You don't need to believe in yourself to send the email. You don't need to feel brave to take a step. Change is mechanical. And when life feels too heavy, mechanics are better than inspiration. The person you admire, the version of you you wish existed, isn't some celestial ideal. It's just a person who took action in spite of their mood, not because of it. And that's what lazy, overwhelmed people forget. You don't need a mood shift, you need a behavior shift. Feelings follow action, not the other way around. At some point, someone probably made you feel guilty for not being more driven, more disciplined, more clear, but you're not broken because you procrastinate. You're not doomed because you keep relapsing into the same loops. You're human. And here's something else they don't tell you. Your identity, the one you think is fixed, like "I'm just someone who quits" or "I've always been this way," is a story. And that story isn't true because it's accurate. It's true because you believe it. The brain loves evidence, and most of us only feed it proof of our worst. So if you want to change your life, stop trying to change your whole life. Change your evidence. Wash your dishes when you feel like sitting. Send the email when you feel like hiding. Write the sentence when you feel like you're not a writer. Each of these things becomes a tiny stone stacked against the old narrative. And before long, the story starts to crumble. This is not about becoming someone new. This is about returning to who you were before you started believing you were lazy. You were not born unmotivated. You were born curious, moved by wonder, pulled by the lightness of possibility. The weight came later, and so did the voice that told you you'll never change. But what if that voice is just noise? What if lazy is just a placeholder for fear, and overwhelmed is just a symptom of believing that you need to fix everything all at once? You don't. You only need to fix the next moment. Let's say it again, because this is the only part that really matters. You are allowed to change your life even if you don't feel ready. Even if you're scared. Even if you don't think you deserve to. James Whittaker never thought he deserved more than a cell. The real work isn't in trying to be more. It's in letting go of everything that's convincing you you're less. So, how do you actually change your life? You stop looking for the perfect path. You stop waiting for the feeling to strike. You stop measuring yourself against a timeline you didn't even make. You just start small, right now. Seriously, what's the one tiny thing you can do today? Do that. Then, do it again tomorrow. You don't trust the voices in your head that only show up when you're vulnerable. You treat your life like a garden, not a machine, and you water it with action, not perfection. If you're lazy, start before you're ready. If you're overwhelmed, start small enough that it feels stupid. If you think it's too late, remember the man who spent half his life behind bars and ended up teaching freedom. You don't need to be extraordinary, you just need to start telling a different story. And the first word of that story is now.